Welcome, everybody, to today's broadcast. We're going to be talking about culture, how to build culture in your business, what culture means, perhaps figure out what mission, vision, and values mean for you in your business. Maybe you think you have this covered off. I can tell you, as someone that's built 19 companies, I'm still very much getting it wrong. I have learned from the guest today myself. He's written an incredible book called Own Your Culture. He's an entrepreneur himself, building a business called Hybrid. I have actually recently invested in this business because I believe in not only his idea, but the entrepreneur himself, Brett. And he's kindly giving up his time today to share what he knows about culture. And it is incredible. So let's get Brett up. Brett, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today and for giving up your time to share your knowledge. I know you're just getting over COVID. So the fact that you're here, despite not quite being fully recovered, is much appreciated and perhaps part of your culture, I guess.
Simon, thanks very much for having me. I may end up muting occasionally for a couple of quick coughs, but that's the end of it. But yes, it's very much a culture of delivery at Hybrid. So if we commit to something, we really do try and deliver. And thanks very much to having me on board and sharing our thoughts and my thoughts about culture with your audience.
Great. Well, we actually have 218 people live on TikTok right now listening in, and we've just gone live on YouTube. We'll also be sharing this recording with our Discord community. And so, so look, let's get into it. Let's start, perhaps digging into what you know. I thought maybe we could start off by maybe just for a minute, you could share a little bit about how you know so much about culture, what your background is, and a little bit about what you're doing today, just for people listening that don't know you.
Sure. So I ran an executive search firm for 15 years, and about 6 or 7 years ago now, I was lucky enough to work with a number of entrepreneurs where they wanted me to find candidates that match the skills, the experience, but also the values match with the company. So it wasn't just find me the right candidate, it was find me the right candidate that matched our values. And this was much harder to do, but going through the process and seeing the outcomes, I realized, wow, there's definitely something different here, because the values element was harder from a recruiter's point of view to do, but much better from the company's point of view. And so I started studying company culture. I've written Own Your Culture was my second book, most recently launched, and then I also wrote Culture Decks Decoded, and basically I created a process to help companies define, embed, and manage their culture. I interviewed 50 CEOs of high growth companies for the books, and I just fell in love with it and became incredibly passionate about company culture over the last 5-6 years now.
Now, you have written a best-selling book, which, tongue-in-cheek, I say, if people are listening to today's broadcast, they don't need to buy. They can get it all from you, straight from the horse's mouth, as it were. But we will put the link to your book. I have read it. It is incredible. I will put the link as well below to this broadcast so people can buy it if they want, because there's so much knowledge there. We won't be able to cover it all today, but I think we'll be able to get a lot of it covered. So, look, why don't we start off, with maybe the dumb question, what is company culture in your mind? How does company culture manifest itself?
So company culture, in my mind, manifests itself in everything we do in the company. So company culture is the way we do things around here. It is pervasive across we're a small team of 7 at Hybrid, but it's pervasive across all environments. Even when we talk to partners and investors, our company culture is in action. Company culture is this very difficult thing to put your finger on, because it's this random combination of good and bad behaviors, norms, habits, principles, processes, and learning over time. And so typically company culture has not been that easy to define, but it's really vital to define it.
And who do you think has the best company culture? Is there any companies you see it, you've seen it, you believe in it? Any ones that stand out?
So there's no such, from my perspective, there's no such thing as the best or the worst company culture. For example, if you were to go to a street gang or the mafia, and you were to go and talk to the people who were born into that environment, they would say that's the best for them. It may not be the best for me, because I wouldn't like to kneecap people as part of my day job. But the best way to look at culture is strong, functional, weak, or dysfunctional. So a strong culture is clearly well defined, well understood, and has been documented. A weak one has not. A functional culture is where the way the company operates accelerates, the culture accelerates the way the company operates, versus a dysfunctional culture is where there is politics or backstabbing or silo mentality, where that behavior slows the company down. So strong, weak, dysfunctional, or functional.
Great. For those guys that are listening live, by the way, you will be able to ask questions in a moment. So we now have 268 people on TikTok. You guys can ask questions. I will ask Brett the questions that you have. If you're building a business, you want to understand the culture, please feel free. The conversation is being moderated by my team, so we'll pick up on your questions. Look, Brett, I wanted to get into a little bit of mission, vision, values, what they are and how to develop them. Could you talk a little bit about the process for people to perhaps get to grips with that element of building culture?
Sure. So I think especially in the early days of a business, this is really important from a personal point of view and from a partner point of view. So if you have a business partner or you have a co-founder, the most important thing to do is to understand that you are aligned when it comes to the mission, vision, and values of the company. So different people look at it in different ways, but for me, the vision is why we are here. If we could change the world in some way, what is our purpose? Why are we here? The mission is what we do on a day-to-day basis to achieve the why. And then the values is how we behave in achieving the mission, ultimately to achieve the vision. But really the biggest reason for failure of early stage companies and startups is because the co-founders are not aligned on these things. And I really think it's critical that people take time to make sure that the honeymoon period is not just that, a honeymoon period.
So how do you align on values? I have had this myself as well in some of the businesses I've been in. I started a comic book business, for example, this one behind me, which ended up costing me $1 million in losses and had a big failure. And I think in part I had the wrong business partner. They might well say the same about me. But it turned out my business partner had a corrupt moral code, but I didn't know that at the time. What's the process? Anything you've seen that works to kind of, I guess, flush out those values or figure out what people's values are?
Yeah. So what I've seen individuals do is go through a little bit of a these are the values that are important to me and why, and list them. And the other co-founder or co-founders can do the same. But the important thing is the why, and using the 5 whys of why. So level 1 why, level 2 why. In other words, really getting to understand why this business and why this is important. If it's all about money and you're both all about money, that's fine. But if one of you is about making a lot of money and the other person wants to save the world, you have to work out where that mismatch is and how that's going to impact the decisions that you make. There is a tool that I can't remember the name of it now. I'll send you the details. But there's a tool where you can actually, 2 co-founders can answer similar questions about their values and what's important to them, and then do a little bit of review of those 2 things together. So I've done this with James, my current co-founder, in hybrid. And it's really, really interesting to see where we overlapped and also where we didn't overlap and have a conversation about that. So for me, it's all about what values are important to me and why, and what values are important to the other person and why.
Now, I sold my last company, a company called Fluid, to PricewaterhouseCoopers. And after the sale was complete, I asked the CEO of PwC why they bought my company, and thinking that it would answer that it was the turnover, it was the clients, and he said, we bought the culture. That was the biggest value in your business, Simon. Someone like PwC could recreate, frankly, everything else. They could get the clients, they could and probably hire the people and probably do it quite quickly, but recreating the culture. So I think when people are listening to the concept of culture, it can sometimes come across as fluffy. right? It's not so easy to put a tangible element on it. But for a second, and I know because I've read your book, you know a lot about like how this affects hiring, for example. Do you want to talk about like hiring for value fit, not culture fit, which I know is one of your things in your book?
Yeah. So how to make your values livable is a key element to building a strong functional culture. And the best way to do this is actually to define what those values mean to you and the organization. And when I work with companies on this, I say start the sentence by we. So, for example, honesty means that we give honest and respectful feedback when as in when we need to. So we define what each value means by describing it, and then what you can do is take that value, so we give honest and respectful feedback, and turn that into an interview question. So the interview question would be, when last did you give feedback in a difficult situation? Why? What was the impact? And this is a very hard question to fluff around and to give an opinion on, because I'm asking you for a specific behavior. I'm asking you for a specific time. And the way the question is structured allows me to ask you further questions following on from your answer. And what we typically do is when we hire at Hybrid, we actually ask the shortlisted candidates exactly the same question. So we see how they answer these questions, and we can score them based on believability and vividness of answer.
I've also noticed personally that when you hire around purpose, you have to manage people less. So I would say manage purpose, not people, because a lot of people get frustrated with managing people. But I think if you hire around the purpose of the business, they're often motivated around that purpose. So you need to manage them less. That's been my experience. Do you think that's true? Feel free to disagree or share your view.
I think that's 100% true. The companies that hire against purpose or hire really effectively against values, invariably, you don't have to work that hard getting the person to the work the way you want them to, because ultimately they are there already. So it's not about managing their work, it's about managing their potential inside of your environment, which is aligned. So I completely agree with you. If getting that right is the secret to scaling a business successfully.
And with the rise, I guess, of this kind of culture concept, I say the rise. I mean, it's been part of the corporate conversation for quite some time now. But do you think that culture can be manufactured with a company that hasn't had originally a culture? So, for example, people are listening right now, and perhaps they feel like I'm thinking about my brother, for example, who owns a window company. He's worked very hard to build his business up. He's got about 45 people in his company now, but he'd be the first one to probably admit that culture wasn't on his mind when he built the company. Buying the equipment to make the windows and getting the contracts to actually have a sustainable business was his focus. And so thinking about someone like him who's worked hard to build up their business, and now they're thinking, look, I'd love to install a culture. What's your experience with going about that?
So every company has a culture, whether you like it or not. And actually that culture forms over time based on how you as the leader work, communicate, behave, etc. The fact that the culture hasn't been defined and hasn't been articulated doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It is there. And actually, if you were to ask your brother about what's important to him, he would say quality of workmanship. He would say happy clients. He would say certain things that is the reason why he's built the business up to 45 and will probably continue to grow the business. And ultimately, that's a result of a culture that he has been subconsciously building. But actually now becoming conscious about it is about actually articulating it and going, okay, what are our values? If we sit down and think about it, they probably are quite obvious in a way, especially if you've got built a business over a number of years. It's just about sitting down, writing them, and understanding how this can help you accelerate the business going forward with recruitment, with onboarding, with new members who may not necessarily know the company that well.
And so, look, conscious of your time, and not only do you still have COVID, you've got a business to run as well. So we always make these interviews short and snappy to give people as much knowledge as we can quickly. Is there anything you think we haven't covered that would be useful to people listening who are thinking about this concept of culture and how to build culture in a business, or how to start a business with culture at the beginning? Anything you want to throw in that perhaps we haven't covered properly here at this moment?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think the most important thing is to understand that culture is the one sustainable competitive advantage that a leader has complete control over. It is something that you can turn into an asset, or it can potentially become a liability. And ultimately, what you as the leader want to do is make sure that you are turning it into an asset. You don't have to, if you're really starting a business right now, you don't have to perfect it, because it's going to evolve, but you must know what you're evolving. I think that's the most important element for me. Is it's not all going to come magically wrapped up in a bow in the first 4 months, but the fact that you're starting to think about it, and the fact that you're starting to develop it and talk to your team about it, means that it's important to you, and means that it's important to them.
Thank you for sharing. Just to close, can you just tell everybody what you're doing at Hybrid? Just I again, just to declare, I've recently invested in Hybrid. I really believe in what Brett's doing, but I thought everyone listening might like a scoop, and we can also put a link, I think, to Hybrid for people that perhaps want to sign up early and get access to your amazing new startup tech. But why don't you quickly share a little bit about the business, and then we'll put a link in the comments for anyone listening now. So the 275 people on TikTok, for example, I'll put a link on there in a moment. But maybe, Brett, do you mind just sharing what you're building and what you're doing?
Yes, thanks, Simon. So Hybrid, which is spelled HYBRYD, hybrid.ai, is a tool that we're building to help manage meetings and help manage the collaboration that happens between meetings. Meetings are increasingly important now. Meetings are vital for the success of a business, and we feel that meetings have not been run well. So we've built a tool that helps you manage meetings better, that helps you increase engagement, increase awareness of the meeting. You can take notes inside the meeting tool. It's really a new way of thinking about running your business properly, because if you build a culture of strong meeting culture, you're able to ultimately create the outcomes you want to create from those meetings. And that's our aim. So we're just about to launch in September. Anybody who signs up through Purposeful Project and through your links can get a free for life Hybrid membership. We're building a tool that we're going to scale over the years. Simon's a great investor who's been really given us great advice over the past 6 months. And we'd love to have some of you along the journey so that we could share what we're doing from a tool perspective and get your feedback and help you improve meetings.
Well, Brett, thank you for letting me invest in your company. It's an honor. I'm really excited about the business. And thank you for also offering the listeners to today's broadcast lifetime membership. And we will put the links down below for anyone listening live. We will put the links in a moment. My colleague Talia will drop the links in just a moment. But thank you, Brett, for sharing your knowledge. We'll also put the links down below to Brett's book. And we can give away a few signed copies. If people comment below they'd like a copy, I'm sure we can get a few signed copies over to you. And if you have any questions about culture, we will be checking the feeds that are going out now over the next few days to see if you have any questions, and we'll pass them on to Brett. And finally, we'll put Brett's LinkedIn down below. So if you want to follow him on socials and get to know him and learn from him as I am about things like culture, and watch him build his amazing new company, which I'm a proud investor in. I will put all the links down below. Brett, thank you for your time. Real honor to have you here, and we'll let you get back to recovering from COVID and building your amazing business.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having me, and great to have you on board as an investor, as I said. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.